Hello, welcome to People and Profit. I'm Kate Moody. Today on the show, we dive deep into the world of undersea cables. Nearly 1.5 million kilometers of submarine cables crisscross the globe. Hidden from view, this infrastructure is the very bedrock of modern communication and data flow, key for both national security and economic stability. That also makes them extremely vulnerable. There's been an uptick of disruptions to power and telecom cables, as well as undersea gas pipelines in recent years. Intelligence agencies say that while many of those outages appear accidental, some can be attributed to sabotage by state-sponsored actors. Russia and China have been singled out as potential perpetrators in the seas bordering northern Europe and Taiwan, respectively. Now, for more, I'm joined today by Raoul Jacquin, Vice President for Strategic Alliances and External Affairs at Alcatel Submarine Networks, one of the biggest firms in the world when it comes to installing and operating these undersea cables. Thank you for being with us on the show today.
Hello, Kate. Thanks for having me.
Tell me, first of all, has your firm seen an increase in the number of disruptions to its cables in recent years?
So our company is involved in the design, the manufacturing, the installation, the maintenance of these cables. But they remain under the ownership of cable owners, hyperscalers, and telecom operators. And what we've seen across the industry in the past years is actually a relatively steady number of cable cuts. Every week, there might be on average 4 or 5 cable cuts. They go unnoticed, because they are attributed to human or industrial activities which are totally legit. Only a very minor number of them are suspected to be linked to sabotage events.
That is, though, what, of course, makes the headlines,
These
isn't
make
it?
the headlines.
As you say, this damage to cables isn't always sabotage. It can be the result of poor weather, human error, all those sorts of things. How can one determine if there was really hostile intent or not?
So as an industrial company, we're not in the business of investigating those causes. We're involving the actual repair of these cables, and intelligence agencies, should they wish to do so, will examine the cable. But from the work that we do, it's in very rare occasions that we're not able to attribute the cause of the cable cut, in which case military or defense agencies take the relay to do that.
So it doesn't make a difference necessarily in the way that you handle those sorts of incidents?
Totally not. In
All right.
fact, it's the same activity that we perform.
All right, well, I do want to focus specifically on Europe's exposure here, so just stay with us for a moment. We've seen a jump in the number of incidents in Baltic and North Seas. That's made protecting underwater infrastructure a top priority for NATO and the EU. They warn that Russian-backed actors may be behind a series of disruptions. Brian Quinn has more.
As European officials met in Hamburg to push for more energy independence, Germany's economy minister issued a stark warning for the continent's telecommunications security.
We've seen increasing attacks on our critical infrastructure, not just on power grids and pipelines, but also important data cables, which are crucial for the digital sovereignty of our continent.
The latest incident in the Baltic Sea came on New Year's Eve, when a telecoms cable connecting Finland and Estonia was damaged by a cargo ship en route from Russia to Israel. The ship, caught dragging its anchor, was seized by Finnish authorities.
We are at the moment suspecting aggravated disruption of the telecommunication and also aggravated sabotage.
An investigation is currently ongoing. In January of last year, a fiber optic cable connecting Sweden and Latvia suffered damage believed to have been caused by a Bulgarian-operated cargo ship. Swedish prosecutors later ruled that incident an accident. December 2024 saw a power cable and 4 data lines between Finland and Estonia cut. Finnish authorities then seized the Eagle S, which they say is part of Russia's shadow fleet of tanker vessels, for dragging its anchor over the cables. Charges against the captain and crew were later dismissed for lack of proof of criminal intent. Moscow has denied any involvement in the incidents, but their proliferation since the start of the Ukraine war has led many to suspect a covert campaign of hybrid warfare designed to test Europe's response. Last January, NATO launched its Baltic Sentry mission, using aircraft, frigates, and naval drones to monitor and protect undersea infrastructure.
How much responsibility for protecting underwater infrastructure should be assumed by governments and public institutions, and how much by private operators?
Okay, this is an excellent question. And over the past few years, we've seen growing awareness by the public sector on the importance of protecting those assets. The telecom operators haven't waited for the public sector to pay attention to this. And one thing that is worth mentioning is that telecom operators have alternate routing options. So I don't want to downplay, of course, the importance of those cable cuts, but in the telecom world, it's been long since the operators have used alternate routing strategies. They have built in redundancy in their network so that a cable cut, a cut to a cable that's transporting data will not necessarily translate into an impact onto the traffic. It may be different for power cables, though. But to answer your question, we are pleased to see the political sphere, especially the European Union, taking action. They have published in February of last year an action plan on cable security, which calls for a number of actions aiming at better prevention, better detection, better response and repair, and better deterrence. And we as the industry, we totally subscribe to this plan, and we're happy to be to bring our expertise and our assets, like maintenance vessels, to contribute to a better cable resilience ecosystem.
Now, we've been focusing a bit on the Baltic Sea and Europe's exposure here, but there are, of course, cables across oceans around the world. Is there a similar risk for all networks? And do similar defense strategies perhaps apply?
Well, it's an issue which is global. And the reason is we see in the recent years somehow of a collision between telecom infrastructure and seabed warfare. Because it's true that geopolitical powers are now investing the subsea environment to exert their power. So it's a global issue, but the means to respond to this remain the same all across the world. They have to do with, like I said, prevention, detection, and of course, the ability to quickly repair cables. Even if in the telecom world, we have options and can accommodate temporary cuts.
We are, though, seeing these new lines being drawn in the global world order. Is the security of undersea cables a new battleground, or does it have the potential to become one?
It is, and that's why navies across the world do realize that they have a role to play in protecting this infrastructure. We should all be reminded that this infrastructure carries 99% plus of the world internet traffic. So it is of strategic importance. It can damage societies, companies at large, if indeed this infrastructure is in danger at a large scale. However, like I said, alternate routing strategies exist, and the redundancy schemes that's put in place by the cable owners, limit that damage.
Submarine cables are increasingly, as you say, being seen as a national security priority, but it means not just protecting the infrastructure once it's installed, but also securing the supply chain, for example, making sure that you have access to the primary materials that are needed to build all these networks. Alcatel Submarine Networks is a French company. What does your supply chain look like?
So we are conscious, indeed, of the risk of having issues with our supply chain. So obviously we have a diversity of suppliers. But maybe a reason why the French state did invest in Alcatel Submarine Networks was precisely for this reason. It was a matter of industrial sovereignty, keeping know-how and assets, and by assets I mean the factories that build those cables and the vessels that across the globe install and maintain those cables. So it's of primary importance for states to ensure they have some level of sovereignty in the way this infrastructure is built around their shores.
Now, the first transatlantic telegraph cable was laid all the way back in the 1850s. We've obviously come a very long way since then. What's next? What role, for example, is artificial intelligence going to play in the industry?
It is obviously having an impact on the industry, a very positive one, because AI will bring more traffic to transit between data centers. And data centers today need to be located where energy is cheap and abundant. So the map of data centers will now reflect upon the map of telecom cables, certainly. And AI, even though it's hard to quantify the exact impact it has on the growth of cables, cable owners, hyperscalers, and telecom operators have no choice, and they need to anticipate that. And as a result, they need to provide connectivity between all those data centers. And much of that growth is today attributed to AI.
So concretely, what is this new map of cables going to look like?
It's going to evolve toward the places where the data centers must be located. Historically, most of the cable routes were between the US and Europe, Europe and Asia, and US and Asia. And they were more or less close to the equator, if I may summarize briefly. In reality, we see now the cable routes evolving to different geographies so as to reach locations where data centers can be economically installed.
When we talk about oceans, we have to talk about climate change. What role is that playing in the industry?
The industry operates over the seas. So for us, it's the natural element where all our operations are taking place. And we're seizing the opportunity, in fact, of deploying this infrastructure at the scale of the oceans to put in place technology that will serve the scientific community. For example, by deploying devices along the cable that will measure key environmental parameters that the research community can use to infer important aspects of climate change at the bottom of the oceans. And that obviously is of primary importance when understanding what's happening at the surface and more broadly at the global scale. Another element is that since we happen to be on the seabed, we can also measure earthquakes that happen on the seabed. Earthquakes under the seabed gave way to tsunamis. So this infrastructure can also serve as an early warning system, and that's obviously of great benefit to all the all the countries or islands which have a shore.
Raoul Jacquin, thank you so much for joining us on People and Profit today.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
And thank you for watching. Stay tuned to France 24.